A very good morning, students. Our online class for today is on the subject moral science. For today's online class, we will begin with a new chapter, that is chapter 10, forgiveness. We will first try to understand the term forgiveness. Forgiveness means to give up the right to be angry at somebody's harmful behavior and not to think of revenge. Hangni ha kakintian kasi forgiveness kamut kajing map. Hangni ki batai ba kajing map kamut kajing la jongi ban ompin I jingdom lani jingbitar yakibrio ki ba lesnil yangi but ban omperkat ban le kilyang yaki dakaba snil. Forgiveness is a high noble value that takes one very close to God. It is useful in two ways. The forgiver is praised for his broad-mindedness. At the same time, his or her mind gets relieved of the grudge against the forgiven person. Keeping the hurt feeling on mind leads to a mental burden that in turn leads to grudge and anger. It generally further leads to certain disorders of the body. But by forgiving a person at fault, one feels liberated from tension and experiences a strange joy at heart. Hangni kiethu ingi ba kajing map kalong kaba krautam kaba yalam ya u lani kabrio banjan sha uble. Habang ni map kidon atli ki jingmentoi ki bangila ban yo. Kabaning kong kalong ba u lani kabrio uba map yakiwe la yaro ya u namar ke jingyar ki jingmut ki jingperkhat jong u bat ka ba ar kalong ba u lani ka brio ki ba map yakiwe ki yo ya ke jingmut jingperkhat ka besting bat lat lot haba kim bo shon ya ki beles niu yaki lada u lani ka brio ki bo shon ya ki brio ki beles niu yaki ka jingmut jingperkhat jong ki ka kya bat ka laro ban yalam shaka jingbitar bat ka jingdom ka jingbo shon yaki wei ka laro ban yalam shaki jingpang ki baharukom haka met hinre da kabaya map yaki jingle bakla jong ki wei u lani ka brio ki sngousting ka jingmut jingperkhat bat ki yo man ka jingsok haka donot jongki. God is gracious and all merciful. He ignores our faults. Why can't we? A person who harbors grudge can never be happy. He is mostly irritated and annoyed. So, make it a point not to collect grudges. You may collect old coins or postage stamps if you like, but never collect hurt feelings, otherwise they will hurt you more and you will lose your peace of mind. So, do learn to forgive others their faults if you want to be forgiven your mistakes. It is a two-way traffic indeed. Forgive to be forgiven should be our motto. Hangni ka yutho yangi ba ublay ulong uba I a but uba map a. Tho lani nyo yaki jing bakla jongi. Ka jingkali kabami pat kalong balay mangi ki pat kum ki brio ngimla banyamam. Hangni ki yutho yangi ba Uno ubrio, uba bo shon yeno, om yo jinkmen. U lani ka brio, ubam la ban map, udon ka mensiam, kaba haba upet yaki brio ki beles niu u dom yaki, bad u bitar yaki, lani u ishra yaki. Namar kata, kadai yangi kum ki brio, ban om nyo yaki jing bakla jang ki wei, bad ban om bo shon yaki. Hang ni, ki sneng yangi, ba ngila ban lum yaki pisar nar ki berim lani ki stam, larangi sngotanat ban lum yaki, hinre ngim judei ban lum yaki jing sngosi, lani ki ki ba pinbong yangi. Namar lada ngi lum yaki ki shimno yaka jing kemen nangi, bat ka jing sngosi kala ban kam kraw shu. Namar kata ngidei ban map yaki jing bakla jang ki wei, lada ngi kwa ba ki wei ru kin map yaki jing bakla jangi. Ka moto haka jing jangi ki brio, kalong ba ngidei ban map haba ki wei ki le bakla lani ki le sniu yangi, knang ba haba ngi ru ngi bakla makiru kin map ya ngi. Here are some stories of forgiveness. Clara Barton, the founder of American Red Cross, was once reminded by a fellow woman of a cruel behavior towards her done several years earlier. The woman asked Barton, "Do you remember it?" "No," came the reply. "I only remember forgetting and forgiving it." Minta ginyapet kato katni ki jingyathu khana shapangka jingmap. Kabaningkong ka jingyathu khana, kayathu shapang kani ka kinthei kabakerteng ka Clara Barton, kabadei ka nongseng jongkani ka American Red Cross. Tia ladan hakaway ka por, baka don kani kaway ka brio, kabapin mau ya kani ka Clara Barton, shapang kata ka jingle sneo, jong kiway ki brio, yaka haki snem ki baladap. Tia kani ka brio ka kali ka Clara Barton, hatu pidangkin mau mo ya katu ka jing le sneo, jong kita ki brio yaka, hinre ka jubab ka ba kani ka Clara Barton ka ai ka ong ngam ki mau syo, ka ong ngakin mau tang ya ka ban klet bat ban map. Coming to the second story. Once the servant of a rich man borrowed some money from a fellow servant. When the other servant asked for his money, he requested him to wait till his next salary day. But the unforgiving man didn't agree and grabbed the poor fellow. He took him to a police station and got him behind bars. When the master came to know of it, he called the unforgiving servant and demanded from him the money that he had borrowed. The servant expressed his inability and begged to be forgiven. "Why didn't you forgive your fellow then?" asked the master. So the unforgiving servant realized his fault and got his fellow relieved. He took a pledge to learn the lesson of forgiveness in future. Hangni ki yathu khanayangi shapang arngut ki shakri lani ki nongtre ki batre hakayeng ukinra jongki uba riuspa bha. Tika ek bachya kalongba kini arngut shi parlak ki bayatre hakayeng jong uniu shakri uba riuspa bha karajia ba hakawe kisngi uwei na kini ki parlak ula pan pisa na unie u parlok jong uba uyetre lang. Ti hakawe kisngi pad unie u parlok ubla ai kaliang ye kata kapisa ulapan no ya kata ka pisa na uta uparlok jong ubala shim kelyang ya kanika pisa. Dia uni uparlok jong par ubala shim kelyang uong ya uba umla ban ayo umenta Snobha ban ap haduk kata kesngi bo unyo ya ka jingsiu jong Henry uni uparlok jong uba la ai kelyang ya kata kapisa shem la minjur bat ka jing ong jong dia ke eka bo ule kalong ba ulayalam no ya sha police station but uni uparlok jong bla shim pisa kelyang na namar ba la ban siu ula sha set no ha jail dia haba uni kenrat jong ulayo sngo ye kini ka khana ula khat ye uni we uba la yalam jail yalau jong parlok ula ong ye uba de ban siu no ye ka pisa ka ba ma pat shim kelyang na uni kenrat jong dia uni shakri ubala shim kelyang ye ka pisa na kenrat jong ula ong ye uba snobha ban map yu namar ba la ban siu yaka menta dia uniu kenra jong ula ong yu balai mami pat memla ban map yu la jong parlok dia uniu shakri ubam shimla map yu la jong parlok ula snothu yu la kajong bakla but habu ula snothu yu la kajong bakla ula let police station but ula pelat nopat ya uni uparlok jong ubalasa set jail. Dia narukkan ni kesni ula sngotu ba udeban don kamensim jong ka jingmap. Coming to the third story, a young American woman lived in Hiroshima in Japan after the dropping of an atom bomb on this town by the American forces in 1945. People of Japan believe in Buddhism, which teaches non-violence. So the neighbors of the American woman never treated her with hate. They always greeted her cheerfully with smiles and giggles. She was very surprised at this noble behavior of the Japanese people and one day asked them, "You are so sweet with me. Why don't you have any bitterness or resentment towards me as I am an American?" The Japanese people smiled and said, "This is the lesson of the A-bomb. There must be no more enemies and no more wars. We must all be friends. That is the only way to prevent wars and Hiroshimas." Kini kajing yathu kana ke yathu shapang kawe kariu kantay kabade kanong Amerika kabasa ha Hiroshima ha Japan. Ha Hiroshima ha Japan ha usnam kat kandai spa saupusan kidon kini ke American forces kibalapin ha bomb halor kini ka jaka. Kibrio Jongkari Japan kidai kiba nget hakanyam Buddhism. But kani kanyam Buddhism kahikai yaki yakataka non-violence kabumut ba kajing im suk im stan klem kanu ka jingyale thma lani kajing kulmar. Tike kabajya kalong ba kini ki para marjan kibasa marjan ba kani ka kanthai na nong America kim ju isi yaka laraki kendo yaka kia kren kia khana bat kia rikye bat ka tie kani kanong America kala sngo lingo yakani ka rukomle jongki bat hakawe ke sngi ka kili yaki ka ong yaki bali phi ye yanga hadu ka ne kumno phim isi lani phim pen I ka jingdom yanga watla ngalong kanong America. Kini kinong Japan pat kijubab ki ong ba. Kani kalong ka jingsneng kabangiyo na uniu e-bomb. Kata ka jingsneng kalong ba ngimde shu banduan nong shun lani ngimde shu banduan ka thma. Ngi baro ngi de banlong parlok But kani kadai tang kani hi kalat kabangilaban yadana kajingale thma. Coming to the fourth story, once the Caliph, the spiritual head of the Muslims, was at his table. The slave who was serving food made a grave mistake. He accidentally dropped a dish of hot soup on the Caliph, causing him some burns. Frightened for his life, the slave fell on his knees and looked at his lord with imploring eyes. He repeated the following words of the Holy Quran: "Paradise is for those who restrain their anger." "I'm not at all angry with you," replied the Caliph. "And for those who forgive offenses," the slave went on. "I've already forgiven you," assured the Caliph. "But above all for those who return good for evil," said the slave. "I set you at liberty and give you 10,000 gold coins," the Caliph declared. Hang nepat kiyathu yangi shapang uta u Caliph ubelong ukli do jongkanyam Muslim ke kabaja kalong ba ha kapor bodang shong bam ha kamiet uwe na ki shakri jong u ulakum bakla bad ulakum pinhab ya kani ka jingbam kabalong ka soup ha u Caliph bad uni u Caliph ula minsaw melumala uni u shakri namar bola tiang ula dem khosio but ula pet ya u Caliph but ula ong yakini ki kentien ki badan haka Holy Quran u ong ba ka paradise kade na ka benta ki tu kiba te lakam yala ka jingdom lane ki bampin I yala ka jingdom u Caliph ula ong ba u shem la dom ya u uni u shakri ula ong shu ba ka paradise kade na ka benta kita kibala ban map ika jingbakla jong kiwe u Caliph ula ong ba ma u ula map ika jingbakla jong uni u shakri jong u uni u shakri jong u Caliph u ong shu ba ka paradise kalong na ka benta kita kibale ke kababha ya kaba snew but u Caliph ula ong ba ula pin lai luat ya u but u ai ya u shipau hajar kita ki gold coins. Coming to the fifth story, one day Yusuf was sitting in his tent in the country of Arabia. He was known for his personal charms and for his sense of forgiveness. It was nightfall and an extremely cold wind was blowing. A stranger suddenly stepped into the tent. He was in a shattered state. The king's men were badly after him and he was running from pillar to post. Yusuf consoled him with sweet words and also entertained him with a rich food. Then he provided his guests with a comfortable bed and both of them retired for the night. Yusuf got up in the wee hours and waked up his guests too. Giving him his swiftest horse and a lot of money, he asked him to ride away to some safe place. The guests had, in fact, murdered Yusuf's son, and that was why king's men were after him. But Yusuf's behavior had jerked his conscience and he owned up his fault and offered to surrender to the police. Yusuf gave him even more money and advised him to cross the borders of the country and live in another country in peace. Doesn't this show that nobleness begets nobleness? Hangni kiyathu yangi shapang uni u Yusuf katba udang shongkai hakaten jong u kabadan hakari Arabia. Uni u Yusuf ulong ubrio uba don ye kamensim jong kajing map but kamensim ban yarap yakiwe. Tilajia hakawe kamien kabalong kamiet kabakriat bat bakaleer ka be bha. Lawan hakata katen kaba usa unia u Yusuf lawan uwe ubreo uba ithu. Unia ubreo udan hakajing ki palo ka jingmut kajing perkhat jong u. Bali uki palo kalong namar ba kini ki breo jong usiem ki be nadien jong u bat namar ba ki be nadien jong u unia u breo u mare na kawai ka jaka shakawai pat. Ti unia u Yusuf ulai kren ye u daki kentien ki bajam bar ula ai bam ru ye u. Bar hakju kapor unia u Yusuf ula ai ya unia u breu ka jaka ka baun thia. Haka step per nga bha unia u Yusuf ula khie bat ula let ru ban kresiu ya unia u breu. Ula ai ha u yauta u kulai u bestet bha bat kapisa shibon bat ula ong unia u breu ba u deiban let no shaka jaka kaba kham shngan ya u. Dia ka kaba penlong yakini ki breu jong usiem ban be nadien jong u kalong ba unia u dei u breu u bala penyap ya ukun jong unia u Yusuf. Dia unia u breu haba u yo ya ka jinglong jong unia u Yusuf ulayathu ya u ba dema u bala penyap ya ukun jong u bad ula ong ya u ba ma uhi unlet chaki pulet ban IT no yeleti. U Yusuf haba ulayo sngo ya kata ula nang ai shushu kapisa kambun but ula ai jingmut ya u baude ban let sa no shakaway pat kajaka bat ban shong ban sa hang kata kajaka daga jinkmen. When we read about this chapter, we learn that as human beings we have to forgive one another because as human beings we are filled with flaws, and if we forgive other people they will also forgive us of our mistakes. Habangi puli yakani ka chapter kapan iba kum ki breu ngide bandap dakajing yamap namar ba kum ki breu ngidan pet lala ijongka jingduna barhabangi map yaki breu yaki jingduna ki baki kidan makiru kila ban map yaki jing bakla lani ki jingduna ki ba ngi kumle bat ngi kumpin mong yaki we. Coming to the assignment portion, these are the assignment required to be submitted by the students. The assignment given is that you have to write down the given question and answers in your moral science copy, and I'll also be sending you notes through WhatsApp. Kindly complete both the assignment and the notes by writing them down in your exercise copy and submit it to my WhatsApp number. Kani kare ka assignment ka baphideban pindam kin mau baphideban boot ya kani ka jingkali ba ka jubab ha ki exercise copy jompi but lingba ka WhatsApp ngan pha ya phi ya ka notes jongkani ka chapter phideban pindap yakini baro ar bat ban pha hau WhatsApp number jonga. So students, that's all for today's class. I request each and every student taking moral science to kindly submit your assignment on time. Thank you.